This is what democracy looks like. A win for the people. Over the establishment, over the status quo, even over Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to Harbor. 1 month ago, U.S. Congressman Joe Sestak beat Arlen Specter, the longest-serving senator in Pennsylvania history, in the Democratic primary. Congressman Sestak, thank you, sir. Looking forward to the general election, a couple questions. One is, can you prove that Pat Toomey, the Republican candidate who's a member of the Club for Growth, is too far out, too much of a winger, if you will, for Pennsylvania? Let's start with that question. And how do you prove it?
Well, first off, I've sat down with Pat Toomey and even had a beer with him. Not a bad guy whatsoever. But is he extreme in his views? He wants to drill in Lake Erie. He actually sees this catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico and says, just continue on drilling. And, you know, he did head the Club for Growth. And as John McCain called it, it's a bagman for the ultra-rich. The issue here really for us Pennsylvanians is Pat Toomey, someone I like, will always side with Wall Street and big oil. But as you saw in this last primary, I'll stand up and fight for the working family and what they need. And that's the difference. That's the choice Pennsylvanians will have.
How can you gig him into making statements like Sharon Angle has made out in Nevada about you need your Second Amendment remedies to fight government power, or the Rand Paul comments that said he didn't really like the Civil Rights Bill? How do you get Pat Toomey to make those kinds of far-out statements that can expose him as a right-winger? How do you do it as a politician?
Pat likes to speak for himself. So when he said that regulation of oil companies is almost criminal, I think people in Pennsylvania, where we have the Marcellus Shale, for example, that's going to be a wonderful boon for us in terms of jobs, but they want to do it right, understands that Pat is going to be siding, as he argues, for a flat tax, for example. Corporations no longer will have to pay more than 20%, and millionaires won't have to. He'll speak for himself, and he'll lay out why his ideology is to the right of Rick Santorum. In fact, the American Conservative Union ranks him 10 points to the right of Rick Santorum. Look, Pennsylvania needs someone who actually says, we got to start growing jobs down there. It's why I'm vice chairman of the Small Business Committee and want to have a 15% tax credit for small businesses, not for the oil companies or Wall Street like Pat Toomey wants to.
Okay, you had a free fire zone then right against Toomey. Now let me hit you with the tough questions. How do you mollify the Philadelphia Democratic establishment? Why should an establishment Democrat back Joe Sestak to be a senator?
Because I think they understand that the status quo is not acceptable. I got on the Acela here on Amtrak at 5 a.m. this morning, left Washington, got into Philadelphia. You know 30th Street. I do. Went over and had a breakfast at 7:30 a.m. with the black clergy, who did endorse Arlen Specter. Got on the 912 and came back to Washington. I want them to know that I'm going to go out of my way to make sure they understand and get a cut of my jib. But as we talked, I talked about the poverty of increase in Philadelphia of 22%. 43% of our African Americans are 18 and below are living in poverty. Can't have that any longer. I just want them to understand that it's not going to be about politics for me. I came back down here to Washington to work on the issues that they need, like COBRA. We've got to get that through for those who have lost their health care from businesses. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be making sure they understand I'm there for the constituencies they care about, and politics, set it aside. I don't have time for it.
Well, what about patronage? What about judgeships? What about the stuff that's the bread and butter of Philadelphia politics? You're not going to deal with city committee. You're not going to deal with the governors. I mean, you're not going to deal with the party big shots on dividing up the judgeships, that kind of stuff. That's bread and butter in Philly. That's all they talk about.
Well, just before I came down here on Monday, I went in and sat down with the city council, the president, who has been there quite a long time, as you know. But what we talked about was education. Look, at the end of the day, when I have to make a decision for some district attorney or something, I'm going to set up, just like I did in my district, a advisory board and get those individuals that are best qualified. I believe in this. It's what I saw in the Navy. Hey, merit does matter, and it's the way I'm going to approach it, and I think people want it.
You mean when ward leaders come to you and they say they got a favorite they want for a job or to get into West Point or to get into Naval Academy or a judgeship, you're going to say, I'm doing this based on merit? All your work for the party for the last 20, 30 years doesn't matter? You're going to say that to regular pals in a big city like Philly, that all their work for the Democratic Party doesn't mean nothing? You're going to have a merit-based system for these patronage appointments?
Let me take the example you gave me. Naval Academy, Military Academy, Air Force Academy selections. The way we do it now, I have a 3-step review process. At the end of the day, and I have on there business leaders, previous superintendents. At the end of the day, I sign off on it. And you know what the result is? We get in about 22 people a year when you're only supposed to get about 5 or 6 in a year because we work hard at it. But at the end of the day, it's non-political. You're right. It's going to matter on merit. And I mean that. Hey, we can have principal compromise and they can recommend somebody, but it's not going to be because all of a sudden somebody has a certain position.
So
and that's not how we do it in my district.
Well, in Philadelphia, for example, why should a ward leader bust his butt or her butt for you, get you elected senator, bring a good turnout for you this November if you're never going to do them any favors?
At the end of the day, I think there are many good ward leaders who are going to care about what I do. Hey, they represent somebody. And that's what happened in this last election.
But you're not going to help them.
No,
when you get in there, they call you up and say, I need some help with this job. This guy needs a job. Are you going to help them?
If it's the right thing to do, and it's the merit-based approach. Look, at the end of the day, Chris, you saw what happened in this last race. People came out on the streets who really wanted to believe in somebody, and that maybe politics isn't going to triumph over principle. I do believe in principled compromise, but at the end of the day, I want to be respected for trying to do the right thing, and let the chips fall as they might.
Okay.
I did meet with 50 ward leaders of Philadelphia, had a nice talk, told them I'd like to work with them. But at the end of the day, it's going to matter of whether it moves the city forward that lost 100,000 jobs the last 30 years. Status quo's got to change.
Just last question quickly, yes or no, have you any bad feeling in your heart for the following people? The governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell, the mayor of Philadelphia, Mike Nutter, the vice president of the United States, Joe Biden. Do you have any feeling in your heart that those guys cut you short? They backed Arlen too hard, too long, and didn't give you a shake. You've got no problem with those guys individually now, right?
None at all. I just talked to Ed last night for about 20 minutes, Ed Rendell. None at all. And I'd be honored to have the president come in any day, although I really want Michelle Obama to come in first. What a winner to have come into Philadelphia. None at all.
Last question. Bill Clinton going to help you?
Yes, he already said so. As a matter of fact, they've called us twice.
You can't do better than that. Thank you very much, U.S. Congressman Joe Sestak. Clean as a whistle. Up next, we've already seen the Tea Party vastly influence Republican politics. Could some Tea Party candidates cost Republican seats? They ought to win this November. And looking ahead to 2012, what happens when Tea Party wingnuts demand big roles at the Republican convention? What happens when the crazies want prime time?